Morality, pragmatism, and nihilism. Last video we explored evolution, and morality is a behavior performed by at least human beings. One assumes other organisms also have some kind of moral law, but for now we'll talk about human beings. And if you believe in evolution, then you would also believe that human beings evolved morality. It didn't just come to be. And if you remember my first video in the series, Past, Present, and Future, in there I talk about objectivity, measured objectivity. And it's very important here because there is a large claim that morality is some kind of like objective pattern by which human beings should be judged by whether or not these are good things or not, which makes no sense. Morality, like any other exhibited behaviors, must prove themselves. It's not moral because the universe says so. Same thing as the sun doesn't exist simply because the universe said so. But you can make the claim that considering that our universe exists, and considering it exists using these particular properties and these particular laws, then a sun would exist. And the same thing here for morality. Considering our universe, and considering that human beings exist, and considering that they're social animals, blah, 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 then yes, by using that definition, then yes, morality is an objective fact. But it is only an objective fact at any given time, because over time, the things we interact with change. And since the things we interact with change, our moral stance will also change depending on the things we have access to. And at some point, people might stop dying. So what would be the statement about, oh, murdering someone is bad if no one dies? And so from an evolutionary perspective, we might lose that moral law, although today we might hold it very strongly, you should kill no one. But what about the day where killing someone is impossible? What do you make of the moral standard? Well, some could say, well, we keep the moral standard because it's still bad. But you're assuming that these individuals, after 1 million years or after 1 billion years of not ever interacting with death, would somehow keep the moralistic idea that killing someone is not okay. And this is what I mean by, although you may claim it to be an objective fact today, considering our universe today, it does not mean that in a future time, or even in a past time, that killing someone or killing something, whatever that would entail at the given time, would actually be an objective moral truth. And part of this answer is also, how did morality come to be? We didn't start with morality. If you look at bacteria, it's not, where does it say it doesn't kill people? They live by killing us. It's one of the main mechanisms by which they survive. And so clearly, from their perspective, it is entirely moral. In fact, not only is it moral, it is necessary for them to kill you. Morality never comes into play. And that's the important bit here. Morality is just a way for humans to be able to have social behaviors. It evolves straight from social behaviors. Now, you can have morality outside of social behaviors. I'm not going to get into this. I'm just going to go with the obvious big points here, just to cement the idea. And then if at some point I need to do the smaller bits, then we can do that. But for now, just the large ideas. And so clearly, moral behavior is incredibly advantageous to social behavior. And so clearly, animals, or at least human beings, who exhibit moral behaviors will lead to a better social cohesion. And if they lead to better social cohesions, they have better trade, which is advantageous for everybody, which increases the wealth of the group. And this also brings in an idea that people are discussing a lot about, individualism versus collectivism. This is why social behaviors almost entirely fall towards the collectivism spectrum of the dichotomy. Now, I understand that some people might say, but collectivism is about an individual who believes in collectives, which is always a bit silly when you start making definitions based on intent, as though somehow intent equals behavior, as though whether or not I intend to kill you, dropping a 2-ton rock on you is not going to kill you, as though somehow intent has anything to do with that. No. If you have an intent but you never do the behavior, then it doesn't matter that you have the intent. It's a meaningless characteristic. There's no point in starting to define things by the intent to do something. Yeah, you might have intended to be a nice person, but you didn't. You didn't do that. And so it doesn't matter if you intended to save me, you still killed me in the end, and that's an immoral act, and then that leads to worse social cohesion. That's it. And so part of that statement, you can then argue that if you intend to do good things, but you end up by always doing bad things, well, then you're breaking the social cohesion, which ends up by killing your collective, which ends up by killing your grouping of people, which would make it immoral. So you still end up with the same thing. If you intend to do good things, but you always do bad things, then you'll end up by dying off anyway in the end. So it's always silly to go the individualism route, because in the end, since you're always interacting with other individuals, clearly collectivist behaviors will evolve if you're interacting with other individuals. If you're never interacting with other individuals, then yeah, they might not evolve, and so you would never get morality. This is, again, as stated before, this is what morality is in the end. It's just rules between social animals, and these evolve to simplify social behavior. Which brings us to pragmatism, because that's what morality is in the end. It is just a pragmatic way of having social behaviors. And part of this, since I've entered human psychology to some extent, at any given time, the fact that a particular organism believes in morality is completely meaningless to whether or not they're going to perform moral behaviors. And so you can make the statement that a human being is performing whatever moral behavior they're performing, but it doesn't mean they actually have a philosophical way or the words necessary to describe the moral behaviors. There was a time in which human beings had morality without the capability to speak about that morality. Even if you look at the animal kingdom, look at chimpanzees have some kind of moral ruling. They're not complete morons, and they're not completely out of it. They have some kind of moral understanding. They don't eloquate it like we do, but it's still there. So part of this is always remember that there is a difference between philosophy and reality. Always remember this. Don't mix them up. Okay? The fact that you have an idea does not mean that that idea will map to reality. And the fact that you are performing realistic behaviors does not mean that you have the philosophy to back it up. So morality is pragmatic. That's a very important thing here. It's pragmatic. And if it wasn't pragmatic, then it wouldn't exist. And that's why, from a purely rules point of view, it is always more important for you to have a pragmatic argument than it is for you to have a moral argument. Morality should always be used as a breaking point, as a tipping point. That's what morality is. It's the tipping point between pragmatic ideas. Because you could list pragmatic ideas and be like, oh, but if we want everybody to be happy, we could just kill everybody. Well, everybody would be happy, because there'd be no one left to be happy anyway. Which is a bit of a silly answer, since you actually clearly want people to be alive. And so there are ways of making people happy without killing everybody. And so that's what we go towards. You list all the pragmatic ideas, and then you rank those pragmatic ideas based on their morality, which makes significantly more sense. Another part of this is that sometimes there are situations in which there are no moral answers. You simply can't make a moral choice. Someone's house is on fire, and now there's kids burning in it. Right? Do you jump in, kill yourself? I mean, that might happen. You might go in there and kill yourself. How is that moral? Or is it moral to just walk into fire to kill yourself for other people? That doesn't make sense. It's not more moral or less moral. It also implies that the person performing the behaviors wanted it to be moral. Why couldn't they have just been doing their job? Which is the more likely case. I mean, at some point they get jaded from their job, and so it's just a job. It's just a job. It's not just, oh, we're gonna save the people forever. Nah, at some point it just becomes your job. It's like, okay, I'm saving people, but it's my job, so I'm doing my job, and it so happens to be that my job is saving people. So that's what I do. And so it's easy to come up with scenarios in which there is no true moral choice. It's just meaningless. Just did it because it seemed pragmatic at the time. You could argue it seemed moral at the time, but once you actually gone through the behaviors, it wasn't. And if you had explored your options a little more, you might have figured out that, running into that fire might be a nice thing to do, might be a nice thing to think about, but in the end, it's not heroic, it's not smart, it's not good, it's not even moral, it's just suicide. And so at that point, you're better off just doing nothing, let the events unfold, and move on. We'll save somebody else some other day. So although not moralistically nice, it is pragmatic, and it is much better than forcing suicide for claims of morality. Forcing moral behaviors when there is no pragmatic answer to the situation at hand, leads straight to vanity. That's what vanity is. Vanity is the expression of moral behavior without the actual functional pragmatic part behind it. There's a reason why vanity is a sin, because there is no function. It doesn't actually help anyone or anything. It's just a gross display of available resources. Now, you could argue from some social perspective there might be some kind of advantages, so we're not going to get into that. We're not exactly doing some human psychology experiments. If we want to do that, we'll go with that. Again, dealing with the big ideas, not necessarily all the details, just trying to show the philosophical ideas. And so, yeah, vanity might have some social advantage that I have not explored. It could be just, with vanity, it lets people deal with extravagant wants and needs. And so you have people who want a car made of gold. Well, now you have to make a car made of gold. How does that make any sense? But that allows the extravagant person to pay for technologies that would not have been explored otherwise, which could lead to very good technology. For example, we have video games, which for all intents and purposes, yes, is a waste of time to some extent. It's still fun and blah, blah, blah. It provides some social cohesions, online games, MMOs. But for all intents and purposes, it is a waste of time. Video games use a video card, and that card has now become a very useful tool for large data processing. AI works with video cards. Now, AI isn't up to snuff right now. It doesn't do everything we'd like it to do to be really, really effective, but we're looking towards that future. And if video games didn't exist, if someone was not vain, if you will, or wasteful, if you will, enough to invest into these video cards for purely entertainment purposes, they would not exist. And so this is why you end up with these weird ideas that what seems like a wasteful behavior today might not be a wasteful behavior tomorrow. And again, pragmatism. Pragmatism. If you can show some kind of advantage, then it might be a good thing that at least a certain part of the population does it. Over time, know that pragmatism will always win. That's just by definition. If you do advantageous behaviors, they will exist, and if you perform disadvantageous behaviors, they will simply stop existing over time. At the given time, it might be, at the time that the behaviors are being exhibited, it might be very good or very bad, might look very good, might look very bad. Over time, bad behaviors always disappear. So that's another point about morality, is that at any given time, something might look immoral, but over time, over the long run, there will be more and more moral behaviors. It's just a standard definition. It's guaranteed to happen. It has to happen. Over time, things have to be more pragmatic, because otherwise, where do all the dead organisms go? Like, why did organisms die to begin with? They died because they didn't have the pragmatic behaviors to survive, and that's why they're gone. And so, by definition, over time, pragmatism always wins. So don't start justifying everything through morality, because if you just do it through morality, you won't have pragmatic ideas, and if you don't have pragmatic ideas, you're just going to be dead. Over the long run, you will be dead. It's just an exercise in futility. But you can use morality as a ranking system to say, oh, well, this is better since blah, 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 since morality does sometimes provide advantageous behaviors. So it's worth taking into consideration. And finally, nihilism. If you do simply more pragmatic things, then what's the point of morality? As stated before, there is some kind of objective truth to morality. The problem with a purely moralistic point of view is that you don't know what the future holds, and so over time, your moralistic ideals might change. And so, yeah, it's just a statement about the fact that we don't really know what could be moral in the future, since morality is only as objective as the current reality. And so it is objectively true that we have evolved morality, but it's not necessarily objectively true that in 1,000 or 3,000 or 3 million years that stealing will be bad. Like if we end up with robotic slave labor, then you make the claim, oh, you stole something from what? From the machine that makes all the things for free? That no longer makes sense. And so you have these shifting ideas of morality, since some of these things are no longer possible. At that particular time, people would be more saying like, oh, they used to think that stealing was bad. Then they might even think that we're idiots. Why didn't we just share everything? You see, this this is human psychology evolving over time, assuming it happens. It might not happen, but that would be human psychology evolving over time. To them, the idea of stealing no longer even makes sense. Why would you state that when everything is free? And you could argue, well, they could just look at the past and see how in the past this was not advantageous to economical ideas. But again, they have to go through this entire exploration of ideas and philosophies before they can even make sense of it. And so this is the entire step that you need to do just to be able to say, this is moral, this is not moral. And so over time, these ideas change. There's no point to strictly state, no, this is moral, it's always going to be moral. No, at a given time, something is either a good idea or a bad idea. And you should always lean towards pragmatism, because in the end, pragmatism wins. In the end, pragmatism works. That's what the word means. Thank you for listening. If at all possible, donate to my Patreon. And goodbye.